The sirens of Hive Grenthos screamed again. Not the kind of sirens that made people run. No, these were the kind people ignored. They were as normal as breathing. They had been ringing for so long that they'd become the soundtrack of human existence in the Underhive. A thick haze of burnt oil hung in the air as endless. Machines clanked and hissed in rhythmic chaos. Millions of humans toiled day and night, trapped in a maze of pipes, heat, and smoke. They were not soldiers, not heroes, and just workers, the invisible spine of the Imperium of Man. Among them was Lyra Ven. Her uniform was patched, her respirator scarred, and her gloves torn. But her eyes still had a little light left in them. Every morning before her shift began, she whispered a quiet prayer. "Emperor, just let me live through today." And then she'd disappear into the noise. Lyra's job was repairing plasma conduits deep within Manufactorum. Sector 27B, a hellish labyrinth where one wrong move meant vaporization. The plasma grid powered the assembly lines that churned out ammunition for Imperial armies fighting wars across 1,000 worlds. If she stopped working, soldiers somewhere would die without bullets. Not that anyone ever thanked her for it. When she arrived that day, she saw 2 stretchers being wheeled out. The workers on them weren't moving, their skin blackened, eyes melted shut. Another conduit overload, another incident. The overseer just muttered, "Replace them," as if they were broken servitors. Lyra tightened her grip on her toolkit. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from exhaustion. "Another 2 gone," she said quietly. Beside her, Jorek, her shift partner, spat into the grime. "They'll log it as equipment failure. The administratum doesn't like bad numbers." They both knew what that meant. The deaths would vanish into paperwork, just like the others. The air was hot enough to burn skin. Sparks danced like fireflies as Lyra crawled through a narrow shaft to reach the damaged plasma lines. The glow from the conduit lit her face in blue light. Sweat rolled down her forehead as she muttered, "For the Emperor," or whatever part of him still watches. The hum of the machines grew louder, like a heartbeat, a broken, dying heartbeat that echoed through the metal bones of the hive. Hours later, the workers were given their 15-minute nutrient break. Lyra and Jorek sat beside a leaking pipe, sharing a ration bar that tasted like iron and despair. "You ever wonder," Jorek said, biting a chunk of his ration, "if anyone up there even knows we exist?" "You mean the Spire nobles?" she asked. "Yeah, them, or the ecclesiarchy, or the Emperor himself." Lyra looked up. There was no sky, only pipes and metal. "We're not meant to be known," she said. "We're just parts in the machine." Jorek chuckled, but it was an empty laugh. "Parts that bleed." Before she could answer, a loudspeaker crackled overhead. "Attention workers! All praise to the Emperor of Mankind. Remember, your labor is holy, your sweat is sacrifice." The message looped again and again until it blended into the background hum. Lyra stared at the Voxcaster. "Funny," she said. "They talk about holy work, but the Emperor never came down here to fix a conduit." Jorek grinned. "Maybe he's scared of the smell." They both laughed this time, a rare sound in a place where laughter felt like rebellion. That evening, a flicker of light illuminated the horizon, a firestorm in the distance. The mid-hive was burning. Rumors spread fast. A workers' guild had refused to surrender their rations to the tithe collectors. They called it theft. The Arbits called it heresy. From their section, Lyra and her crew could see the smoke rising through the shafts. The fires glowed red through the fog like the eyes of angry gods. "They're killing them," someone whispered. "Flamer squads. Execution orders. Whole families wiped out." Jorek clenched his jaw. "All they wanted was food." "Food's a luxury," Lyra muttered. "Obedience is what matters here." The next morning, workers from that burned sector were replaced with new ones from the lower levels. The dead were labeled traitors, their names erased. Nothing changed. The machine still roared. The tithe still came. The prayers still echoed. But something shifted inside Lyra. For the first time in years, she felt something sharper than exhaustion, anger. That night she sat alone by a flickering lumen light. Her hands were stained with oil and blood. She whispered into the shadows, not to the Emperor, but to herself. "We build their ships. We forge their guns. We keep their cities alive. And yet, we're nothing." The machines around her groaned like dying beasts. The air pulsed with heat. She looked up at the metal ceiling and imagined the stars she'd never seen. Somewhere up there, soldiers fought and died in his name. But down here, in the depths of the hive, People lived and died without a single prayer said for them, and for the first time she wondered, what if the Emperor had truly forgotten them? The thought scared her more than death, because if the Emperor had forgotten them, who would remember them at all? The sirens wailed again. Lyra closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Tomorrow I'll keep working. But maybe, not just for them anymore." The machines roared. The lights dimmed. The story of the forgotten had only just begun. The next day came like every other, loud, choking, and cruel. The hive never slept, and it only screamed louder. The sirens had barely faded, before the overseer's voice crackled through the intercom. "Sector 27B, report to Conduit Grid 7 for inspection. Double quotas, no excuses." Lyra Venn tightened her respirator and adjusted her tool belt. Her skin still ached from the plasma burns of the last shift, but rest was a privilege she couldn't afford. The machines didn't stop for pain. She met Jorek at the lift. His face looked older overnight, eyes red from lack of sleep. Around them, hundreds of workers shuffled into position. Men, women, and half-mechanical servitors. Everyone moved with the same slow rhythm, like ghosts dragging chains. "Double quotas again," Jorek muttered. "They'll squeeze the life out of us before the week's over." "They already are," Lyra replied, stepping into the rusted lift. As the lift groaned upward, the hive around them buzzed with metallic thunder. Conveyor belts clanked endlessly, carrying shells, bullets, and armor plating, all bound for wars light years away, somewhere beyond the hive. The Imperial Guard was fighting for the Emperor's glory, but down here there were no glory banners, just smoke and silence. The conduits that day were worse than usual, cracked, leaking plasma and half-melted from overuse. The blue light cast eerie shadows across the walls, and the heat made the air shimmer. "Careful," Jorek warned as they crouched near the main line. "One wrong twist and the whole grid will blow again." Lyra nodded, hands steady. She'd done this 1,000 times. But today something inside her had changed. She didn't just see wires and circuits, she saw chains. Chains that bound them to an empire that didn't even remember their names. As she tightened a bolt, her ears picked up faint voices echoing through the tunnels. Not the usual machinery noise. Human voices whispering in corners. When their shift ended, she decided to follow the sound. They led her to an abandoned ventilation shaft behind the old storage depot. A small light flickered inside. About a dozen workers huddled there, their faces half hidden under hoods and masks. The moment she stepped in, all eyes turned toward her. "Who sent you?" a woman demanded, clutching a makeshift wrench like a weapon. "No one," Lyra said. "I heard voices. I just wanted to know." Jorek appeared behind her. He had followed too. "Easy," he said, raising his hands. "We're not enforcers." The tension eased slightly. A thin man stepped forward. His name was Raylan, one of the scrap haulers. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "If the overseers find out, they'll skin us alive." "What is this place?" Lyra asked. He hesitated. Then after a long pause, he said, "It's what's left of the Workers' Guild. What's left after the Purge." The room fell silent. Lyra had heard about the Purge, the rebellion in the mid-hive that ended in flames. Everyone thought the guild was gone. But now here they were, the survivors. Raylan continued, his voice low but burning with conviction. "We used to believe our work was holy, that the Emperor watched us. But now we know better. The Administratum takes our lives. The Arbites take our rations. And the Spire Lords take the credit. We are slaves, not servants." Lyra's heart pounded. "You're talking heresy," she whispered. He smiled bitterly. "Truth is always heresy to those who rule." The group talked late into the night. They spoke of sabotage, of striking against the Manufactorum, not to destroy the Imperium, but to make it see them. To force recognition, Jorek was quiet the whole time, listening. When they finally stepped out of the shadows, he turned to Lyra. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "That this is madness," she said. He grinned. "Maybe, but maybe madness is the only thing that'll make them notice us." The next few days passed in tense silence. Lyra worked as usual, but her mind wasn't in the conduits anymore. She noticed everything now. The broken lives around her, the hollow eyes, the hands that never stopped moving. She watched an old man collapse beside a conveyor belt. The overseers didn't stop the line. They dragged his body away and logged it as equipment downtime. Something inside her snapped. That night she returned to the shaft. The others were waiting. Raylan, the woman with the wrench, and 5 more. They'd been gathering tools, scraps, and data slates stolen from the foreman's quarters. Raylan spread out a map on the floor, a schematic of the hive's power network. "We hit the main plasma regulator," he said. "Just enough to shut down production for 1 day. 1 day of silence. That's all we need to be noticed." Lyra stared at the map. "And when the Arbites come?" "They always come," he said. "But at least they'll see us this time." The plan was simple, but simplicity was deadly in Hive Grenthos. On the 7th day, during the next power cycle, they moved. The group split into teams, sneaking through forgotten tunnels and maintenance shafts. Lyra's hands shook as she bypassed the security lock. Yorick covered her with a salvaged shock baton. Sweat dripped down her brow, but her focus didn't waver. When the final switch flipped, the lights flickered across the hive. One by one, the manufactorum sections went dark. Then silence. For the first time in generations, the endless noise stopped. No machines, no sirens, no shouts, just silence. The workers across the sector froze, confused. Some cheered. Others prayed. A few wept. But above them, alarms began to blare. Not the work sirens this time. Security alerts. The Arbits came fast, black-armored figures with glowing visors and thunder hammers. They stormed the tunnels like shadows with guns. The smell of promethium filled the air as flamers roared through the darkness. The rebels scattered. Lyra grabbed Jorik's hand as they ran through the ducts, coughing and blinded by smoke. "Go," he shouted. "Don't stop!" She stumbled, fell, but he pulled her up. Explosions echoed behind them. When they finally reached the vent exit, a blast threw them forward. Lyra hit the ground hard. The air burned her lungs. When she turned, Yorick was on the ground, motionless, and a piece of shrapnel lodged in his chest. "Jorek!" she screamed, crawling toward him. He smiled weakly, blood trickling from his lips. Guess the Emperor noticed after all. And then he was gone. Lyra sat beside him for what felt like hours, her tears mixing with the grime on her face. The hive burned around her, alarms, gunfire, screams. The rebellion was crushed before it even began. But the silence they created, it lingered. For one brief moment, the hive had stopped, and in that silence, the truth had spoken louder than any machine. She looked at the darkness around her and whispered, "You can kill us, but you can't erase what we've seen." Then she disappeared into the tunnels, her heart now a flame that no Arbit could extinguish. The spark had been lit, and somewhere deep in the hive others had seen it too. The fires in Hive Grenthos burned for days. Smoke climbed up the levels like black ghosts, staining everything it touched. The rebellion was over before it had truly begun, crushed under the iron boots of the Arbits and the weight of imperial law. The Administratum called it a small incident of worker malfunction. The Ecclesiarchy called it a test of faith. But the people who lived through it had another word for it: loss. Bodies were cleared before dawn. Names were erased from the records. But whispers remained, whispers of those who dared to defy the machine. And among those whispers was a name the hive could not bury: Lyra Ven. Lyra awoke days later in the ruins of an old cargo shaft, hidden beneath collapsed metal beams. Her body ached, her throat burned, and her mind swam in fragments and explosions. Jorik's face the sound of his last breath. She sat up slowly, coughing up dust and blood. Her respirator was cracked. The world around her was silent except for the occasional groan of settling metal. She was alive, but at what cost? Dragging herself out of the wreckage, she found the hive unrecognizable. Half the sector had been sealed off, destroyed, to contain contamination. The air was thick with smoke and death. Servitors roamed the ruins, cleaning debris, collecting corpses. They moved like insects, mindless, unfeeling. Once they had been men and women like her. Now they were just tools, stripped of memory and humanity. Lyra stumbled past them, clutching her burned arm. Her steps echoed in the silence, and every shadow felt like a ghost watching her. When she reached the lower levels, she saw it, painted on a wall in crude black ink. The workers still live. She froze. Someone had survived. Someone still believed. In the days that followed, she wandered the ruins like a phantom, scavenging food, avoiding patrols, and searching for any sign of the others. Then one night she found them. Hidden deep beneath the manufactorum's waste tunnels, a small group of survivors huddled in the dark, maybe 20 people. Faces she recognized, faces she'd thought she'd lost. When she stepped into the light, a young girl gasped. Lyra, you're alive! The crowd stirred. Whispers spread. The conduit woman. She's back. Raylan, barely standing, approached her with a limp. His arm was bandaged, his eyes bloodshot. We thought you were gone. Not yet, she said hoarsely. Jorek's dead. Silence, no one spoke. Then Raylan lowered his head. He gave his life for something most people don't even believe in anymore. Lyra looked around the group. The rebellion failed. They'll come for us again. You all know that. Raylan nodded. Maybe, but the hive hurt us. The silence we created, and it woke people up. There are others talking now, other sectors, other hives. You started something, Lyra. She shook her head. I didn't start anything. I just wanted to be seen. And now you are, he said softly. In the weeks that followed, they moved carefully through the hive, spreading messages and hope in secret. They painted symbols in forgotten corridors, small emblems shaped like broken gears, the sign of the forgotten hands. To some it meant rebellion, to others survival, to all of them it meant remembrance. Workers began whispering Lyra's name like a prayer, the one who stopped the machines. She became a myth, a story told in the shadows. Mothers told their children about the woman who defied the Imperium and lived. Men whispered her name during long shifts, drawing strength from it. Even those who didn't believe in rebellion began to believe in her. But hope was dangerous in the Imperium. Word spread faster than Lyra could have imagined. Soon the Arbits began their hunts again. Patrols swept through the Underhive, dragging anyone caught with the rebel mark into the open, never to be seen again. The survivors hid deeper. They spoke in coded messages and symbols drawn in oil and ash. Still, the message persisted. The more they tried to erase her, the louder her name became. One evening, as she repaired a damaged air pump in hiding, Raylan approached her. They're calling you the voice of the forgotten, he said with a faint smile. She looked up from her work. I'm no voice. I'm just tired. Maybe, he said, but tired people are the ones who start revolutions, because they have nothing left to lose. Time passed, and rumors began to circulate, stories that the upper hives were trembling. Production had slowed. Workers were disappearing. The administratum blamed inefficiency. The workers knew the truth. Something was changing. Lyra had become a symbol, not of victory but of awareness. The first crack in the armor of the Imperium's indifference. But symbols were dangerous things. One night, as she slept in a maintenance tunnel, a distant explosion rattled the walls. When she woke, smoke filled the air. She heard boots, voices. Search the tunnels! An Arbit shouted. She grabbed her respirator and ran, her heart hammering. She ducked through pipes and shafts, the sound of metal boots behind her. The hive roared to life again. Alarms, fire, chaos. At the end of a tunnel, she saw a shaft leading upward. She climbed, her fingers bleeding. As she reached the top, she found herself on a platform overlooking the lower hive. Thousands of tiny lights flickered below. The workstations, the manufactorums, the endless chains of humanity. She looked at them breathless and whispered, "We are not just machines." Then she turned to face the soldiers behind her. No one knows what happened next. Some say the Arbits killed her there, her body lost to the furnace fires. Others believe she escaped, vanishing into the labyrinthine hive tunnels where the Imperium could never find her. But what mattered was this: her voice remained. Days later, graffiti began to appear on every level, scratched into walls, painted on pipes, etched into the sides of manufactorum tanks. It read, "Remember the workers. Remember Lyra." The overseers tried to erase it. They sent servitors to scrub it away, but it always came back, because an idea cannot be burned, and a story cannot be silenced. Months later, in another hive city on another world, a young worker adjusted his respirator and looked up at a flickering lumen sign. Someone had written the same words there too. He smiled, tightened his gloves, and whispered, "For the Emperor, and for us." Then he went back to work. Lyra Ven was never seen again, but her memory became legend. A whisper carried through the tunnels of the Imperium, a reminder that even in the darkest depths, hope could still find a voice. Because sometimes the smallest spark, even from the hands of the forgotten, can light a fire that reaches the stars. In the grim darkness of the far future, even the smallest voice can ignite a revolution. If you felt Lyra's struggle, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell, so you never miss another story from the depths of the Imperium. Your support helps keep these forgotten tales alive.